are listening to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. It's Season 16, Episode 6. Today, host Dean Jones welcomes a true culinary legend, the James Beard Award-winning and New York Times best-selling author, Dorie Greenspan. Dean and Dorie dive into her incredible career and her newest collection of simple yet memorable bakes, Dorie's Anytime Cakes. Get ready for a delicious conversation. Next, on the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast.
Welcome to the program. Today we're speaking with internationally known author Dorie Greenspan about her new book, Dorie's Anytime Cakes. Dorie, welcome back to the program.
So happy to be here. Thank you, Dean.
Dorie, I'm excited to talk about your new book, the gorgeous Dorie's Anytime Cakes, which celebrates simple, straight-from-the-oven cakes after creating thousands of complex and lauded recipes over the years. What was the impulse to pare things down and focus on the simplest cakes for this collection? And what is the power of cake that these simple recipes capture?
I know that I've always loved simple cakes. It just never occurred to me that I could put them together in a collection until I was asked to do a story for the New York Times for their holiday section. And they wanted holiday cakes. And I thought, I'm not really a frosting girl. I'm not a towering layer cake girl. And when I think of holidays, I think of pulling out all the stops. And so I suggested to them, what about cakes that don't go out to the table? Cakes that sit in the kitchen cakes, counter cakes, so that as people pass by, they just take a slice. Or when you're preparing the holiday meal and you just want to nibble, or you have weekend guests. And I was so surprised that they said yes. And as I worked on the recipes for this story, I thought, this is really what I love. These are the cakes of my childhood. These are the cakes that I think bring people together, the power of cakes to welcome people to your home. They're very, as simple as they are, I find they're very generous, they're convivial. And it was after making just 3 cakes that I thought, there's more. I kept thinking, what if I do it this way? What if I do it that way? And I was really lucky that my publisher thought that it was a good idea.
The book includes some wonderfully unexpected, and I want to say really fun recipes, like the kafune corn cake and the miso cheddar scone cake, and more. And out of all these creations, what recipe surprised you the most with its flavor, ease, and sheer enjoyment? And can you share an example of adding a dash of the unexpected in a classic recipe?
So the kafune, actually, I don't know how you really pronounce it. Let's say...
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. But that cake surprised me because it's a Brazilian cake, and it's made in a blender, and you look at it and think, never, it's never going to be a cake. And it is. And Jaine's carrot cake, also a cake from Brazil, is like that as well. It's a push-button cake. I love when all you have to do is push a button. And it's like magic. It becomes a cake. I had really a few experiences like that. The orange cake from Greece that doesn't use flour, but uses sheets of phyllo dough that are dried in the oven, and then you crumple and crackle them into shards. But I think cakes that I was working on, that, when you're working on a recipe, at least when I'm working on a recipe, I have an outline. And then as it's coming together, as I'm seeing the ingredients, or as I'm smelling them, or I always taste the batter, I think, oh, I could add this, or I could add that. And I think you mentioned the miso cheddar cake.
Yeah.
That kind of, I always wanted to put miso and cheese together in a cake. But when I made the harissa lemon loaf,
I wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so much fun to play with savory cakes, with salty cakes, and being able to use harissa, an ingredient I love, in a cake was really fun. Or the cake that has feta and sumac and za'atar. I hope that bakers will be surprised by them. I was surprised by them.
It's so nice to have, you don't see enough savory cake recipes, and it's nice to have them because in addition to making like a cheeseburger or doing any kind of like, offerings with wine, etc. It's nice to have these savory cakes, and especially the harissa lemon loaf looks beautiful, and it's got a wonderful flavor profile. So it'd be great with wine and other things. It's just really exciting to be able to make something like that and present it to people.
Thank you. Yes, with wine. Yes, with soup.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. Just as a nibble that it's like a twofer. You get cake, but
Yeah.
you get those savory, warm ingredients.
You include playing around suggestions throughout the book, which I loved. Ways of the baker to customize a recipe with ingredients like citrus flavored sugar or hot honey, which is exciting. How does the concept of playing around intersect with the necessity of precise measurements in baking? And what is your personal must-have ingredient when you're improvising?
So that question of precise recipes and playing around, how can they be partners is really interesting. So I've always been a what if person as I'm making something. It could be made and I'll think, well, what if I had done this or what if I had done that? And that's how playing around was born. I had that in my first cookbook. Um, I know it's important to follow the recipe, particularly in baking. There are ratios, precise measurements that you need. But once you've got that, that's the structure, the foundation of the cake. Then you can play with flavors, and you use the term flavor profile. And you can change the flavor profile. You can add, so in my pantry, spices. You can change the spices and use what you really love. You can add, I love using dried fruit and nuts. The recipe might not call for it, but usually you can add them maybe all the time, without really changing anything. You mentioned zest. So I always have oranges or lemons around, and being able to add zest adds that zing, that brightness, a little bit of pizzazz to something. So my advice is always to follow the recipe exactly as it's written the first time, then taste it and think, okay, what would you really like in that? And play around a bit.
I love that. Anytime Cakes is your 15th cookbook, and your career has been is a monumental testament to the craft of baking. And your books are canon in many book collections and in many bookstores and libraries. How has the tactile experience of baking changed for you over this 15-year period?
First of all, thank you. I feel like I'm not tall enough for that, but um, you know, I don't know that it's really changed. I've always loved and appreciated the process of baking. And I tell new bakers that they should be patient, that unlike cooking, where you can do something quickly and have the result, baking takes time. You have to measure out your ingredients. They get mixed in a certain way. Cake is baked, it has to cool. And so I think that baking plays to patience, and it plays to the pleasure of process, of being able to enjoy touching the ingredient. No one can see me, but I'm kind of I'm pretending to feel the ingredients, of watching ingredients transform as you add other ingredients. I find that just a joy, and that's been all through my career. That hasn't changed.
You live, cook, and write in both France and the United States, and you've even been awarded the Order of Agricultural Merit by the French government. How has your deep and extensive travels fundamentally impacted your baking, and have you changed the way you see baking through your travels?
So I have, I think French baking, it was my first when I started to bake, and I came to it late. I didn't cook or bake as a kid. Um, French baking was my North Star. And I've since been so lucky because I have been able to travel, or I have been able to meet people from other cultures and get to know their baking. Some people go on trips and bring home souvenirs, spoons or t-shirts, or I bring home recipes. And I always think that's the greatest gift, when I can get a recipe or an inspiration from a trip. And I started to make a list, which I haven't finished, But of all the recipes in Anytime Cakes that were inspired by travel, and the list is long. There's the pistachio cake that the recipe was given to me by an innkeeper in Pont-Aven, which is in Brittany in France. There's the Greek orange cake that I mentioned, and the Sifnos cheesecake. I had never been to Greece, and I was just so taken with the Greek way of mixing ingredients and adding spices and citrus. I just find I just find that it makes travel richer to be looking for a recipe, to have your eyes peeled for something you've never seen before.
I love that. I work with a lot of immigrants from all over the world, and many of them, when we start talking about food, the one thing that they always say, very nicely, is that American cakes are often just really mediocre or horrible, and they're covered with tons of sugar. Like we tend to like berry cake. Almost cake is secondary to the frosting in many cases in many bakeries. It's kind of grotesque. And then you kind of bring it back to the cake tasting good. And, oftentimes your cakes are as is. They don't need a lot of, stuff on them. They're just, as good as it is. And you're looking on the flavor and the presentation. What advice do you have to home bakers on trusting the simplicity of a perfect slice? And how do you decide when a cake is truly finished instead of covering it with mounds of stuff?
So, this question has so many. You just made me pop with so many ideas because I was thinking about the cakes that I grew up with, and I found as I was working on this book, I would make something and it would bring back a memory, or I would have a memory and translate it into a cake. So, can I just go back a little bit to my child
Absolutely, please. Yeah.
a while ago? But so my mother loved food and she loved sweets, and she never cooked. She cooked occasionally, but she certainly never baked. But there was always cake in the house. And there were these kinds of anytime cakes, these kinds of counter cakes. There was always a loaf cake, or there would be a very simple round cake, a crumb cake, crumb cake, crumb cake. Everybody in my family loved crumb cakes, coffee cakes. And they didn't, in a way, I guess I wasn't brought up on frosting. Frosting was for special occasions. These were everyday, anytime cakes, and I loved them. And as I was working on the book, all of the memories of the cakes that I loved, the cake my grandmother made, the cakes that we would be at friends' homes and their parents would, as a kid, and they would bring out. I didn't know that a cake needed whipped cream or ice cream or frosting. And I think that there's there's plenty of places for frosted cakes, and I love what people are doing now with elaborately frosted cakes and cakes with flowers. But there's always a place, I think, for a simple cake. There's a place to make it, and there's a place to serve it. I'm gonna bring back. I don't think the simple ever went away, but I'd like to bring it back. And when you say, when do you know that a cake, you know, what a cake needs? It's whim for me, but it's also the occasion. And I think those of us who bake, and I wish everyone in the world would bake. I'm an evangelist for home baking. Those of us who bake for ourselves for the pleasure of it, but we bake to share. And so we want to make cakes that we know the people we love will enjoy. And so that's how we decide whether it needs frosting or not.
I love that. And jumping off of that, I noticed there were more than a few recipes in here that have people's names attached to them.
Mm.
Do you have any specific cake that your closest family and friends request from you the most?
So my family, they're cookie people. So they love the world peace cookie, which is a chocolate a chocolate cookie with chunks of chocolate and salt. And they also love a cookie that I made that I called the classic jammer, which is a sablé with jam in the center and crumbs. And because this was a cake book and I wanted to be able to make as many people happy as I could, I did do jam bars, and they're really a play on that cookie. But ever since I started making, and it's got to be over 20 years ago now, the Swedish visiting cake, it has been high on my family's list of favorites. And after all of these years, I tweaked it. I mean, it didn't really need tweaking, but I kept thinking about it, and I added rum-soaked raisins. So the cake is a very simple cake. It's mixed by hand, as so many of the cakes in the book are. And the recipe was given to me by a woman who grew up in Sweden, and her mother made this cake. And her mother would say, the cake is so easy to make that when I see people coming up the road, I can mix the cake, put it in the oven, and it will be ready for them when they're ready for coffee.
I
And
love that.
it's such an easy, wonderful cake. And so I just played with it a little bit. I added rum-soaked raisins. I added some apple chunks to the top. And and I made it just a little thicker, thinking that anything that's good would be better if you had more of it.
I like that.
Mhm.
If you could have, now this is a hardball question. If you could have a slice of your BFF brownie cake or any cake of your choosing with any historical figure, who would it be? And what would the conversation be around with the shared dessert?
So it would have, it's a great question. And I love that you chose the BFF brownie cake, the Best Friends Forever brownie cake. And so I don't know if she's, sorry about that noise. Mhm.
Oh, I didn't hear anything.
Okay. So I'm going to start all over again. Okay.
That's totally fine. Yeah.
Okay. So I love the question, and I love that you chose the BFF brownie cake, the Best Friends Forever brownie cake, because I guess she is a historical figure at this point, but she was a great friend of mine. I would want to share this cake with Julia Child.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So I had the incredible privilege and pleasure of working with Julia. And then we became friends. We used to talk on the phone in the mornings. I would come home from Paris, and she'd be the first person I'd call. And her first question was always the same: is the food still good? And she also wanted to know if cooked beets, were still sold in the market, and they are.
Nice.
So I would share the cake with Julia, and I would want to. I worked with Julia, it's almost 30 years ago. Could that be? Yeah. So Baking with Julia, the book we worked on, came out in 1996. And since that time, I've done so much, and she was such an inspiration for my career. And I would love to go back and talk to her about now, what's happening now, what she thinks of it. She was such a cheerleader for home bakers and home cooks. And I'd love to get her read on this. And she was a good hugger. I'd want to get another hug.
I love that. That is wonderful. Considering your entire remarkable career, being a Times columnist, a Beard Award-winning author, and now the author of 15 essential cookbooks, what is a single piece of advice you could give to your younger self, the one just starting out in the kitchen?
I think I would give young me the same advice that I would give old me. And maybe if I had started younger, I would have followed my own advice. Trust yourself. Trust yourself. I was always, and still, I'm always like, is this okay? Will this be okay? Should I have done it differently? Will I do it different? I'm forever questioning. And I think a certain amount of questioning is really good. And I think a certain amount of doubting so that you go back and check yourself is really good. But a little bit more trust in yourself would have made life a little easier.
It's a great answer. I love that. Dory, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. I always enjoy getting a chance to talk to you, and it was wonderful. Now, the book will be coming out today as of this airing. So I want to let people know that they can get the book through links in the bio, and you can get it at all better bookstores. It'll be everywhere. So thank you, Dory, for being on the podcast. It was just a delight to talk to you once again.
Thank you so much. It's just lovely to launch the book with you. Thank you.
You have been listening to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast, and that was a truly delicious chat between your host, Dean Jones, and the iconic James Beard award-winning author, Dory Greenspan. We hope you're inspired to bake a simple, most memorable cake from her newest collection, Dory's Anytime Cakes, available everywhere books are sold. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes of the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. We'll be back soon with more insightful conversations from the world of books, food, and libraries. This has been Season 16, Episode 6. Until next time, we will see you in the library.
Calling all cookbook lovers. Do you dream of having a massive, curated library of the world's best cookbooks right in your pocket? Stop dreaming and start cooking. CKBK is the ultimate digital cookbook library, giving you access to nearly 1,000 full cookbooks from top authors instantly. Search by ingredient, create custom recipe playlists, save your favorites, and even sync with your print collection via Eat Your Books. It's perfect for serious home cooks and collectors.
And here's a special offer just for Well-Seasoned Librarian listeners. Get 25% off a subscription to CKBK. Just head over to their website and use code WELLSEASONED at checkout. That's code WELLSEASONED for 25% off your subscription to CKBK. Level up your pigeon library today.